Good morning, everyone. We are here at the last day of 71st IFA Congress at Rio, and I'm joined by Piet Battiau, who is the head of consumption taxes unit at OECD Center for Tax Policy and Administration. Thank you, Piet, for joining and speaking to Taxsutra. Yesterday, it was a fantastic panel wherein you spoke about number of multilateral efforts that OECD is driving, not just in the context of BEPS and corporate taxes, but pretty much relevant in the context of VAT as well. What was heartening to note that you've been able to make a step forward with almost over 100 countries on board on measures relating to VAT. Could you tell us about what this multilateral framework is? What is the relevance in the context of international VAT?
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. The VAT GST guidelines have, well, first of all, probably interesting to stress that the guidelines have now become a so-called OECD legal instrument, so an OECD recommendation, which is a legal instrument that is non-legally binding, but that expresses a strong political commitment of countries to around the consensus around a number of key principles and standards, in this case for the treatment of VAT GST trade. And the standard has been developed by in a truly inclusive manner. So through discussions, very in-depth technical discussions involving not just OECD countries, but also G20 countries, including India, China, but also countries from so non-OECD, non-G20 countries from around the world. Plus the business community. I think that's a key important element. So everything has been discussed in detail with the business community. So I think it's the result from a really inclusive process. In terms of relevance, the fact that these guidelines have been developed through this inclusive framework, through intensive consultation, there is clear recognition around the world that they represent best practice. And in reaching out to countries and working together with countries in their VAT reform, we already feel the very strong impact of these guidelines in improving the neutrality of VAT systems and improving the international neutrality through the application of the destination principle.
Right. Any one or two key takeaways from these guidelines? What are the sort of important features of these guidelines? And you mentioned that these guidelines are also already making an impact.
Yes.
Any one or two examples that you already observed in terms of the impact?
Well, a very broad example is, well, let's start with the key elements. The two key aspects of the guidelines are, first of all, a strong confirmation and articulation of the principle of neutrality of VAT as a tax that is a tax on final consumption that should essentially be levied only ultimately in the country where final consumption takes place. That should be neutral for businesses. Businesses are only the collectors of the tax. So that's one key feature of the guidelines, the neutrality. The second key feature is the feature that is focused on the application of the destination principle in practice, which is aimed at, on the one hand, avoiding double taxation and unintended non-taxation, but also on the other hand to increase certainty in international trade and to remove any possible obstacles that VAT might create in international trade. Two quick examples in terms of neutrality. A number of jurisdictions, including New Zealand, but also India, China, have in various stages, of course, of the reform, have reformed their system to make it more neutral in line with the guidelines. For instance, the New Zealand system was already very neutral, of course, but they redesigned their VAT refund system in line with the guidelines and triggered by the guidelines. In terms of the application of the destination principle, probably the most salient feature there is are what we call the B2C guidelines that provide rules and mechanisms to ensure taxation of sales of digital products, apps, streaming of videos in the country of consumption, only in the country of consumption, but in the country of consumption. And what I mean by that is that in very many cases, these transactions were not taxed.
Right.
And this has already led to a vastly increased VAT revenue in over 40 countries.
Right. You touched upon a very, very crucial aspect which the corporate tax world is trying to find an answer to, taxation of the digital economy. And number of options have been evaluated. Digital presence, significant nexus. The most sort of viable option that people do think is through the mechanism of the VAT perhaps. And perhaps your role or your working party's role is going to be crucial, I assume, in the digital economy solutions as well. Can you tell us more about how sort of you are involved in the work relating to digital economy as well?
Yes. Well, it's relatively straightforward in the sense that, well, I'm sure you're familiar with the Action 1 report, the Battiau Action 1 report, where there is a direct tax angle and an indirect tax angle. And in the indirect tax angle, we have developed together with again, through an inclusive process, rules and mechanisms to, again, ensure taxation, VAT taxation, so taxation of final consumption of, on the one hand, online sales of services and supplies of low-value goods from online sales. And one of the key ongoing work streams is to develop further detailed implementation guidance to ensure that these principles are being and these rules are being implemented efficiently and consistently. So that's a key work stream that we continue to be involved in. Our work is currently focusing on the role, what we call the role of digital platforms in the collection of VAT. So one of the key challenges of the digital economy, as you know, is that it gives the opportunity for traders, even small traders from around the world, to become multinationals, which creates a number of challenges for tax administrations, not only to identify the transactions that they take place, but also how do you organize tax collection, right? What we all see, of course, is that a lot of these new forms of trade are triggered by or facilitated by digital platforms. I won't name names, but everyone know which sort of names that we that are salient, well known around the world. And what we're looking at is how these platforms, as central hubs for the digital trade, how we can involve them in the collection of the proper collection of VAT. When it comes to the direct tax angle, there we are, of course, less directly involved. What is clear, of course, is that countries currently in their VAT systems raise revenue through a mix of taxes, a mix of personal income tax, corporate income tax, VAT, which have different features. And it would be probably unrealistic to expect that an entire tax framework could be replaced by a VAT. So currently, I mean, only relying on VAT to address the challenges of the digital economy is probably unrealistic.
And coming to the last part of my question, and I'm in the context of India and China, and particularly India, what I wanted to understand is what has been India's role in developing the international VAT guidelines, and your quick observation about Indian GST system, which completes 2 months, in fact, today.
And congratulations for that. It's an enormous achievement that I have followed with great interest and passion almost. India has been a long-standing participant in the work of our Working Party 9, so which is the Working Party on consumption taxes. We've had very good levels of participation and involvement in the discussions and in the work. India has always been, since the beginning, a very active participant also in the OECD Global Forum on VAT, which is our platform where we have over 100 countries participating, that is used to gather the input from non-OECD countries into the work. So India has played a key role there too. In terms of the GST reform in India, I can only express my admiration of what has been achieved. It is truly impressive. I have followed with close interest. I have also met at various occasions with state finance ministers, very informally, just to discuss options and possible challenges. It's an enormous leap forward, of course, this reform in that it is expected indeed to increase certainty, to increase the neutrality of the system, and to clearly have a positive effect on growth and on economic activity in the country. It was a highly needed reform. We all know that. Now everything will depend on the smooth implementation.
Sure.
But also there, I have been impressed about the technological support, the entire logistical framework that supports the implementation. So I look at the reform with great interest, and I hope to be able to visit India and come and look at what has been achieved with my own eyes.
Absolutely, we look forward to hosting you very soon. And absolute last question, I'm asking you to do crystal gazing. Do you think in VAT we will be able to achieve somewhat similar and inclusive framework in the maybe coming 5 years or so?
Yeah. Well, I would think that to some extent we already have that inclusive framework through our global forum on VAT, which we are looking at perhaps further expanding at this moment. Expanding in the sense not that much in membership, because we already have almost all countries that have a VAT as a member, but expanding in the sense of perhaps increasing the number of meetings, or perhaps looking at more regular regional meetings in between global meetings, like Asia-Pac meetings, Latin American meetings, African meetings, so that we can become even more inclusive. So our inclusive framework is sort of, the VAT inclusive framework has not the same legal setup as the well-known BEPS inclusive framework, but in effect, I think we are close to achieving the same level of inclusiveness in the indirect tax space.
Excellent, and once again, congratulations for driving this initiative, and many thanks for speaking to Taxsutra. Really appreciate it.
Very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.